You open your eyes. It's not dawn yet. You can tell by the absolute darkness pressing against your face. But this isn't the familiar darkness of your chamber. This darkness is salty, wet, and relentlessly cold. It presses in on all sides, punctuated by the rhythmic, unnerving sound of wood groaning and water slapping against an unseen hull. Something is very wrong. This is not your bed. This is not your home. Your head aches with a blinding, throbbing pain, a souvenir from the blunt trauma that ended your former life. Your hands are bound tightly at the wrist, not with chain, which would suggest some fleeting value, but with rough, abrasive rope that cuts into your skin every time the ship lurches. You can smell the bilge water, a vile mix of salt, old fish, unwashed men, and something disturbingly acidic. You try to flex your numb fingers. They don't respond well. You realize you are lying in the belly of a Viking longship, nestled amongst strangers who share your terror and your rope. Your village was raided last night. Your former life, your name, your status, your family, is already dissolving into the churning grey water behind you. You are no longer a person. You are property. You are a thrall, the Norse word for slave, in the late 9th century. The stakes are immediate and absolute. If you cannot keep up with the rowing, you will be thrown overboard. If you sicken, you will be thrown overboard. If you cause a moment of inconvenience to the men who now own you, you will be thrown overboard. Most captives perish on this harrowing journey, or within the first year of the brutal new life awaiting them in Scandinavia. Let's see if you can make it through the next week. Settle in. This journey across the frigid North Sea and the life of quiet, bone-deep exhaustion that awaits you on the other side is what you must now endure. You are already soaked through, your teeth are chattering, and the man next to you is weeping silently into the rough wool tunic you now wear. This is your new reality, one of unrelenting cold, constant threat, and the quiet struggle for basic biological survival. We will explore the voyage, the duties, the few paths to freedom, and the cold, unromantic realities of your life as a Viking's thrall. You open your eyes again. Only this time, the light is a harsh, blinding grey that tells you the sun is well above the horizon. Your captors have unshackled your hands, replacing the rope with the cold, damp wood of a heavy oar. The nausea is overwhelming, and your stomach is empty, having convulsed hours ago over the side of the ship. This is your first great challenge, surviving the crossing. You thought your days of work were done when the Vikings took you. You realize quickly that your work has only just begun. The men who took you, the Norse, are practical above all else. They didn't raid you for sport, they raided you for resources. And right now, the most crucial resource you possess is the simple, biological ability to pull that oar. Think of it as an involuntary, one-way cruise. The air is a constant enemy. It doesn't just feel cold, it feels actively hostile, stripping heat from your body with every gust. You're sitting mere inches above the waterline in an open boat, with no shelter beyond the curved shield wall lining the railing, which, of course, is there to protect your owners, not you. You realize the dampness is permanent. It is in the rough wool of your tunic, in the chilling mist rising from the waves, and worst of all, it has seeped into your very bones, promising you a lifetime of chronic aches, assuming you live that long. The men around you, your captors, your owners, are loud, bearded, and utterly unfazed by the conditions. You watch them closely. This is your first and most critical lesson in survival. Read the room. They speak in a strange, hard language, Old Norse, which sounds like rocks grinding together. You understand nothing, and yet you must understand everything. When the man beside you, a veteran thrall you realize by the blankness in his eyes, shifts his weight, you shift yours. When he spits, you keep your head down. Your hands, once capable and soft, are already blistered. You've been gripping the oar for what feels like an entire day, and the wood is rough, wet, and unforgiving. Every pull sends a shock wave of agony up your arm, and you know the skin will tear soon. There is no complaining. There is no break. There is only the rhythm of the oar, dictated by the relentless beat of a small drum or the chant of the styromarder, helmsman. Stop rowing, and you receive the hard, sudden jolt of a long, heavy cane across your back, administered with calm, professional efficiency. You wonder how anyone survives this. The answer, you realize, is that most don't. The weaker ones, the sick and the defiant, are already gone, either having died from exposure in the chill of the night or having been pushed over the side. You step over the space where a man lay just hours ago. There's nowhere else to walk. The crew doesn't acknowledge the death. You learn quickly that life is cheap, and your specific life is currently the cheapest thing on this boat. The cold has now transitioned from a mere discomfort into a constant, dull physical threat. You find yourself constantly trying to curl into yourself, to preserve the tiny amount of warmth your own body is generating. Your fingers ache with a throbbing pain, a mix of cold and raw skin. You realize the Vikings are masters of exploiting human desperation. You are so preoccupied with staying warm and avoiding the sting of the lash that you cannot focus on much else. You'd kill for a Tylenol right now. Instead, you get to chew on a hard, stale piece of dried meat and a mouthful of brackish water, and you are expected to be grateful. As the sun begins its low, slow descent, the storm arrives. It doesn't creep up on you. It attacks. 1 minute, the sea is merely brutal. The next, it is a living enemy. The longship, which seems so imposing on land, is now a tiny, vulnerable chip tossed on gigantic grey waves. Water begins to crash over the sides, forcing the crew to start bailing furiously. Your life immediately becomes simpler: bail or die. You realize the Vikings are not rowing for conquest now. They are rowing for survival. The styromarder shouts, his voice a raw sound of absolute urgency. You see the raw, focused fear in the eyes of your owners, and this is strangely calming. For this brief, terrifying period, you and they share the same fate. If the ship goes down, you all drown. The irony is not lost on you. You are less afraid of your masters when you are all equally threatened by nature. You bail until your back feels like shattered glass. You bail until your hands are bleeding freely and the blood is washing away in the cold salt water. You bail until your mind is a blissful, exhausted blank. You have achieved an state of pure physical function, the thrall's ultimate psychological defense. You realize that the storm, in its way, has helped you survive. It removed the terror of the men and replaced it with the immediate visceral task of living through the next 5 minutes. Finally, after what feels like a week compressed into a single waterlogged hour, the storm passes. The ship is battered but intact. You are alive. You have survived your first major test, the North Sea crossing in a storm. Congratulations. You slump against the bench, your entire body trembling uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the bone-deep fatigue. Your master, the large man who hit you earlier, looks at you with an expression you realize is not pity, but cool assessment. You performed adequately. You did not break. You are worth keeping. As the final light drains from the sky, you are given a piece of dried fish, a small, tough morsel that tastes aggressively of salt and preservation. It is not enough. It is never enough. You chew it slowly, hoarding the minuscule energy it provides. You are learning a new kind of hunger now, not just for food, but for warmth, for safety, for rest. You thought your toughest survival challenge would be avoiding the Vikings' axes. It turns out it's avoiding the unrelenting grind of the sea, the weather, and your own exhaustion. You look forward, straining your eyes in the darkness. Land is coming. You can smell it now, the faint, earthy scent of moss and pines mixed in with the salt. You have endured the ship, but now you must endure the land. And the land holds different, more permanent dangers than the sea. You survived the initial terror, only to find yourself facing the quiet, grinding brutality of a life where you are a non-person. Tomorrow brings a new, permanent set of challenges. Your day isn't over yet. You feel the cold, hard earth beneath your feet, a staggering contrast to the relentless, dizzying movement of the ocean. The longship has finally pulled ashore, dragged onto the pebbled coast of what you assume is Norway or perhaps Denmark. You are immediately disoriented by the sheer scale of the land after weeks confined to the narrow ship. The air here is cleaner, but no less cold, carrying the sharp scent of pine resin and wood smoke, a terrestrial smell that somehow feels more permanent, more ominous than the sea. Your new reality begins not with a grand ceremony, but with a stark, silent appraisal. You are lined up with the other survivors, the weaker ones having long since vanished, and your value is being assessed by the local husbandi, the master of the farm, and his family. The Vikings who captured you are merely merchants of human property. They raided you for resources. The husbandi is a large, quiet man with eyes that pass over you with the dispassionate gaze one reserves for livestock or a new tool. He prods your muscles, checks your teeth, and ignores the bruises on your wrists. You are realizing with chilling clarity that you are merely a piece of human capital being transferred to a new ledger. The most terrifying thing about this place is not the overt violence, which is always present but usually contained, but the quiet complexity of your owners. They are not the howling, single-minded demons of your coastal village's fearful legends. They are a family. You hear the laughter of children, the low murmur of conversation, and the bleating of sheep. You see the husfreyja, the mistress of the house, weaving fine cloth near the central hearth. This paradox, that your absolute non-existence as a person is occurring right next to the mundane, lived reality of a family, is a profound psychological shock. You are separated from your remaining companions and assigned to the main farmstead. You cannot understand their language, Old Norse, which puts you at an immediate and constant disadvantage. Every command, every glare, every gesture is a puzzle you must solve, instantly, to avoid punishment. You are given a single name, a curt, functional label like kalda, cold, or thrall, literally. Your own name, the one your parents gave you, is irrelevant and forgotten. You are learning the first fundamental rule of thralldom. You have been erased. Your hands, which suffered crossing the sea, are now handed an implement even heavier than the oar, a shovel or perhaps a heavy iron axe. Your new duties are immediate and brutal. You are expected to integrate into the grueling, year-round rhythm of the farm. Since you are male, your duties will focus on the heaviest, most demanding physical tasks. You are marched out to the forest with an axe that is slightly dull and perpetually too heavy for your exhausted frame. Your task is timber. The Nordic forests are vast, cold, and unforgiving, and you must fell trees, strip them, and drag them back through the frozen undergrowth. You swing the axe until your muscles burn, and then you swing it more. You quickly learn that exhaustion is not an excuse. It is merely a state of being. The relentless expectation of hard labor is designed to break your spirit and your body, replacing your identity with obedience. You thought your landlord back home was demanding. Try having an owner who can legally break every one of your fingers if you stop working. You feel the hunger gnawing constantly. Your diet is meager, a watery porridge in the morning, perhaps some preserved fish or cured meat and thin beer. It is just enough to keep you vertical, productive, and miserable. You realize that your body is a fuel-burning engine, and your master rations the fuel precisely to the point of maximum output, not maximum comfort. You look at the large, healthy, free Norseman eating rich stews near the hearth. The difference in calorie intake is a visual measure of the hierarchy, a constant, irritating reminder of your low standing. You are now at the absolute bottom of Viking society, far below the poorest free farmer, Bondi, below the dogs, and only slightly above the most valuable breeding sow. You realize that the sow, at least, is kept warm and fed well, because her offspring are valuable. Your value lies only in the output of your body today. This blunt irony stings more than the cold. One of the most immediate dangers you face is the social terrain. The law of the thrall is simple. You have virtually no rights. If a free man kills you, the fine is meager, often equivalent to the cost of a few oxen. If you strike a free man, you risk being instantly killed or permanently mutilated. You must learn the etiquette of non-existence. This means never making eye contact. Your eyes must be downcast. Direct eye contact is a challenge, an impertinence. Moving silently and efficiently. You must be present when needed and invisible when not. Never resting in the presence of your owner. Rest is a luxury reserved for the free. You spend your nights sleeping in the drafty, smoke-filled longhouse, but not near the high seat or the warmth of the central fire. You are relegated to the edges, often sleeping on a dirt floor or a low, flea-ridden plank of wood near the animal pens. The smell of unwashed bodies, smoke, and manure is the constant lullaby of your new life. Your back aches from the hard surface, and you wake up with the distinct knowledge that you are exhausted before your day has even begun. You are a silent witness to the daily life of the farm. You observe the complexity of your owners, which makes your plight both worse and strangely easier. They are not constantly raving tyrants. They are busy farmers. You realize that if you can be quiet, predictable, and highly efficient, you can fade into the background. This is not kindness. It is simply cold, agricultural economics. You realize your master is financially invested in keeping you alive and healthy, just enough. One day, you encounter a subtle paradox. While working in the fields, you are given a command by the husfreyja, the master's wife, which you don't understand. You hesitate. She doesn't scream or strike. Instead, she slowly, patiently demonstrates the task, tilling a specific row using the heavy ard. She is firm but clear. You complete the task correctly. This simple act of demonstration, born of necessity, is your first lesson in the language. You realize you must learn to read their intent from their movements, becoming an expert in nonverbal communication. The veteran thralls, those who have been here for years, become your quiet teachers. They don't speak to you, but you watch the subtle ways they have adapted. You notice the tiny hidden cache of dry kindling, the better sleeping spot near the wall, and the sly, almost imperceptible way they skim a little extra gruel when the master isn't looking. You realize that these micro-adaptations are your armor against annihilation. You are learning to use your physical discomfort as a narrative thread. The cold is constant. The hunger is a gnawing background noise. The pain in your feet and hands from the endless work is your daily soundtrack. You cycle through these sensations, using them to anchor yourself in the present. You feel the cold seeping into your very bones every morning, a feeling that promises you a lifetime of chronic aches. You watch as a young, defiant thrall who arrived with you tries to run away. He is caught within hours. His punishment is swift and brutal, serving as a quiet, powerful warning to all the others. He is not killed, which would be a waste of investment, but he is marked, a physical scar that labels him as unreliable and confirms his low social standing forever. You realize that your entire social structure, the one you must now survive, is built on the calculated terror of public, painful punishment. You'll never forget the sight or the smell of his blood drying on the dirt. Your hands shake, not from fear, but from the sudden, stark clarity of your reality. You are now fully immersed in the silent brutality of this system. The Viking Age was not just about raiding. It was about the endless, quiet grind of coerced labor that built the Norse world. The day finally ends. You stagger back to your sleeping spot, your entire body a chorus of aches and pains. You lie down, and the damp air seeps into the raw skin on your hands. You close your eyes, trying to block out the sounds of the farm animals and the gentle snoring of your owners near the central fire. You survived your first day in captivity on Scandinavian soil, but physical survival is only one part of the challenge. Tomorrow brings more bone-jarring work and the insidious, slow creep of exhaustion that threatens to claim your mind and soul. You have to endure the price of this unrelenting labor, which will be your next great test. You wake to the harsh, cold sound of the husband's voice, a guttural bark that means you have exactly 5 minutes to get outside. Your muscles scream in protest, stiff and cold from the damp night and the relentless strain of yesterday's labor. You feel the constant, gnawing hunger in the pit of your stomach. It's not the dramatic, acute hunger of starvation. It's the quiet, chronic emptiness that is the daily backdrop of your life as a thrall. This is the true price of your existence, perpetual, bone-deep exhaustion. You are not just tired, your body is actively cannibalizing itself to meet the demands placed upon it. Every movement is an effort, a tax levied against your rapidly dwindling physical reserves. You are given just enough food, primarily watery porridge and maybe some sour milk or preserved fish, to maintain minimum function. Your master doesn't provide enough for you to thrive, only enough for you to survive until the next harvest. Your diet is fundamentally lacking in the necessary fats and vitamins, guaranteeing a slow, quiet decay of your physical health. You quickly learn that the work never stops. The rhythm of the Norse farm is unforgivingly seasonal, and you are the engine that drives it. You are required to possess a terrifying degree of general skill. You must be able to chop wood like a woodsman, plough fields like a farmer, and repair the fence like a carpenter. You thought your skill set back home was diverse, but here, lack of skill in any area means increased risk of injury or punishment. Winter. You are chopping wood, repairing fences, hauling ice and snow, and tending livestock in freezing conditions. The risk of frostbite is constant, a quiet enemy that can steal your fingers or toes, while you are simply trying to chop enough kindling to keep your master's family warm. You learn to check your extremities constantly, because the only thing colder than the air is the raw indifference of the husbandi if you lose a finger. Spring. You are ploughing the hard earth with the heavy, primitive ard, a task that requires immense physical strength. The ground is rocky and unforgiving. Every morning, you feel the strain in your lower back, a constant, dull throb that tells you your spine is slowly compacting itself under the strain. You are planting barley and oats, using techniques that are back-breakingly inefficient compared to what you dimly remember of your former life. Summer. You are in the field from dawn until dusk, scything hay, weeding, and building up stores. The heat, when it comes, is almost as dangerous as the cold, leading to dehydration and collapse. You learn to ration your water intake, sipping slowly, all while feeling the sun beat down on your neck. The flies are constant, irritating companions, and you lack the energy to even swat them away effectively. Autumn. The harvest is a frantic, desperate race against the looming darkness and the first frosts. You work 12, 14, 16 hours a day, pushing your body past any sensible limit, because the success of the harvest determines if any of you, free or thrall, will survive the winter. The irony is not lost on you. You are working yourself into an early grave so that your owners can eat well and survive comfortably. You thought your commute was bad. Try walking 6 miles in rough, ill-fitting leather shoes, if you're lucky enough to have them, or wooden clogs that are actively giving you blisters and bleeding sores, all while dragging a heavy timber sled. You quickly realize the simple footwear is designed for function, not comfort, and the constant friction turns your feet into a source of constant, low-level pain. Injury is an inevitability, and it is perhaps the greatest quiet danger to a thrall. You are working constantly with heavy, unforgiving tools, axes, adzes, scythes, and grinding stones. You are tired. You are hungry. Fatigue leads to error. One morning, while splitting a tough oak log, the axe slips. You feel a searing, white-hot pain flash through your leg. You look down and see the blood pulsing from a deep, ragged gash on your shin. This is a critical moment. There are no doctors. There are no sick days. The closest thing you have to medicine is the Husfreya's knowledge of herbs, which is rudimentary at best. You are terrified of infection. You watch a man die from infection just 2 weeks after a simple cut on his hand festered. It takes 3 days, and you will never forget the smell. The grim reality is that a bad cut, a broken bone, or even a deep puncture wound is a potential death sentence. You bind the wound yourself with a strip of linen you stole from the wash pile, apply some ground herbs, and you get back to work. You must minimize the visible consequence of the injury, because if the master sees it as permanently debilitating, you become a liability, and a liability is disposed of. You must learn to push the pain down, to wall it off into a distant compartment of your mind. You realize that your capacity for endurance, when necessary, is far greater than you ever imagined. This is your resilience, quiet and desperate. You begin to appreciate the small efficiencies. You learn how to make the axe swing slightly less taxing, how to carry the burden just a bit closer to your center of gravity, and how to find the 3 minutes of true rest that can be stolen while the master is occupied with the livestock. These tiny stolen moments of respite are your daily victories. You learn to listen to the sounds of the farm, the distant bell of a cow, the scrape of a knife on a sharpening stone, as a map of where your owners are, allowing you to optimize your labor and minimize supervision. The contrast between your existence and the master's is often absurdly blunt. One evening, you are hauling a heavy sack of grain up to the storage loft. The master's son, perhaps 12 years old, rides past you on a pony, laughing loudly and carelessly. He is wearing fine, dyed wool, well-fed, and knows nothing of the chronic hunger that defines your every waking moment. You realize that this child has more legal rights than you do, and his comfort is built directly upon your chronic pain. The irony is bitterly stark. You learn quickly that fresh bread means only 2 days old, and adequate shelter means the rain only comes through in 3 places. You learn that human cruelty is often less dramatic than you imagined. It's not the flaring dramatic rage that harms you most. It's the cold, systematic indifference to your suffering. That is Viking thralldom. You are a tool, and a tool only merits maintenance when its function is failing. You survive. You endure the pain in your leg, which throbs relentlessly and promises to be an unpleasant scar for the rest of your life. You survive the hunger, learning to satisfy your mouth with sips of water. You survive the cold, huddling with the animals for warmth in the deepest part of the night. You have achieved a kind of primal survival state where thought is secondary to function. You look at your hands now, cracked, thick, and calloused, and they feel like tools, not part of your own body. You are living it. You have endured the physical trial, but the system has not finished with you. It wants more than your muscle. It wants your mind. You have to learn how to exist without a self, a name, or a past. You must now face the psychological toll of being non-existent, which is often far more difficult to heal than a broken bone. Tomorrow, you enter the quiet, terrifying world of the thrall's psychology. The physical demands of the farm, the endless cold, the gnawing hunger, the back-breaking labor, have hardened your body into a state of perpetual dull pain. But as your body becomes tougher, your mind begins to crack. This is the new, more dangerous phase of your survival, the slow, systematic erosion of yourself. This is the reality of the silent chain, the constant psychological burden of being a non-person. You wake one morning and try to trace the lines of your former life. The images of your family, your village, the sound of your native language, they are fading. You try to remember the name of your mother. You hesitate. It takes a full minute, a terrifying expanse of mental effort, to recall it clearly. You realize that without the familiar structure of your former life, your church, your social status, your very name, your identity is dissolving. You are no longer referred to by your birth name, but by the brusque, functional tag the husbandi gave you: calder, cold, doubtful, dull, or simply thrall. Your past is becoming a distant, unreliable dream, and your present is defined solely by your capacity to work. Your entire existence is now a single, repeating verb: to labor. The language barrier is your cage. You are surrounded by noise, the chatter of the family, the instructions given to the other, long-term Norse thralls, the loud sagas shared by the free men around the fire, yet you are utterly silent. You cannot speak, and therefore you cannot object, you cannot explain, and you cannot connect. Every subtle expression of humor, contempt, or instruction is lost to you, filtering your experience through a constant, debilitating haze of uncertainty. This means you are perpetually guessing, perpetually at risk of misinterpreting a command and earning a painful correction. Your mind is always in a state of high alert, perpetually translating tone and gesture, which is profoundly exhausting. Your brain is running a full-time, high-stress translation service for a language it barely knows. You become an expert observer. Since you cannot understand the words, you study the faces, the posture, and the micro-gestures of your owners. You watch how the husbandi holds his axe when he is merely contemplating wood versus when he is truly angry. You note the subtle tightening around the husfreya's mouth that signals deep displeasure. You must learn the etiquette of non-existence quickly. Your social survival depends entirely on preemptive obedience and maintaining utter invisibility when not actively working. This is where the psychological damage truly sets in. The feeling of utter and permanent alienation. You are living in a crowded, noisy longhouse, yet you are the most alone person in the settlement. You are an outsider trapped inside a system that actively denies your shared humanity. You realize that the free Norsemen view you not as a rival, but as an entirely different, lesser species, a silent resource they are perfectly entitled to exploit. Still think medieval life was romantic? Wait until you experience the profound hollowness of realizing your entire existence hinges on the whim of people who don't even consider you a person. It is a slow, quiet terror, far worse than the immediate fear of a drawn sword. This constant, low-level dread is exhausting. It is not the terror of the raid itself, which was acute and brief. This is the cold, steady terror of knowing that violence is always a possibility, and there is no legal protection. You might be beaten for a perceived slight, sexually exploited, or even sold off to another farm in a distant territory, or worse, sold east into the grim network of the Russ slave trade, simply because the master needs quicksilver. You are entirely subject to the husbandi's moods and economic needs. You realize you have no control over your physical location, your companionship, or your future. You are a commodity, an investment that can be cashed in at any time. You observe the other thralls, the ones who have been here for years or even decades. They are often silent, their eyes blank. They have achieved a form of psychological adaptation. They have completely walled off their interior life, presenting only a useful, hollow vessel to their owners. This is the quiet breaking. You see a fellow thrall, a woman who worked household duties, finally succumb after a particularly harsh winter. She simply stops responding to commands, staring instead at the smoke hole in the roof, her eyes reflecting the grey sky. Her fate is swiftly sealed. The husbandi doesn't beat her. He simply has her quietly led away and disappears her from the farm's ledger. The cost of replacing her is less than the cost of dealing with her useless, broken mind. This pragmatic cruelty is more terrifying than any rage. You realize you cannot afford this luxury of despair. You must cling to something. You begin to hoard small things. A particularly smooth stone that fits perfectly in your calloused palm. A piece of carved wood you whittle at night. A memory of a childhood song that you repeat silently to yourself while you are splitting logs. A secret language only you understand. These small, internal acts of defiance are the only things that confirm you still possess an independent consciousness. You learn to laugh, but only internally, at the blunt ironies of your situation. For instance, The day the husbandee spends hours complaining about the price of imported salt while you are standing right next to him, starving, knowing your physical labor is the ultimate source of his wealth. You realize your finger is broken, a glancing blow from a dropped tool during the hay harvest. But you hide it. You bind it yourself with stolen linen and continue working because showing weakness is an invitation for further exploitation or disposal. This adaptation, this forced resilience, is what keeps you alive, but it also fundamentally changes who you are. You are becoming harder, colder, more pragmatic. The person you were before the raid is slowly dying, replaced by the relentless, enduring thrall. The most difficult challenge is the loss of your faith, your culture, and your past status. Your gods are irrelevant here. Your old way of life is forgotten. You are forced to witness, and sometimes participate in, Norse rituals that seem alien and sometimes brutal, particularly the occasional sacrifices to the gods like Odin or Thor. You realize that your soul, like your body, is now considered property, or at least irrelevant. You are living under a constant, crushing weight of lowered expectations. Your master doesn't expect you to be intelligent, only obedient. He doesn't expect you to be happy, only productive. The subtle pressure to become what they expect you to be, a dull, silent beast of burden, is the greatest threat to your sanity. To resist, you must keep thinking, even when your mind is screaming for rest. You count the logs you split. You categorize the types of lichen you see on the rocks. You perform tiny, internal intellectual exercises to keep the light of your former self flickering. You memorize the names of the constellations, knowing that no Viking can take the stars from you. This is your life now. You are living it. You have endured the physical challenges of the voyage and the farm, but you know that clinging to your past self will destroy you. The greatest survival challenge is letting go of who you were, accepting your non-existence, and becoming an expert in silence and labor. But beneath the silence, a new thought begins to form, a slow-burning ember of hope, the possibility of freedom. You've heard the whispers among the older thralls, the vague mentions of paying a price, of earning a way out. Psychological survival means moving from mere endurance to active, goal-oriented planning. Tonight, you will lie awake and listen to the legal talk of the free men, trying to understand the path, however faint, to buy back the life that was stolen from you. The season has turned again. You have endured the worst of the cold and the deepest psychological loneliness. Your mind, which fought so hard to remain intact, has found a new focus, a single, cold point of light in the vast darkness of your servitude: money. You realize that freedom is not a matter of escape or rebellion, but a matter of commerce. The emotional terror of thraldom has been replaced by a calculated, cold pragmatism. You realize that your survival and the faint chance of freedom is purely transactional. And in the Norse world, every person, every possession, and every right has a price, even your own life. You are property, and property can be purchased, even by the property itself. This leads you to the quiet whispered concept of frigjöf, manumission, or the buying of one's own freedom. It sounds like an impossible, distant legend, but you know it is enshrined in the very laws that govern the free men. The laws they speak about around the fire while you are sleeping on the cold floor. The Norse law codes, like the Icelandic Gragas or the Norwegian Gulating law, specifically outline the legal path for a thrall to purchase their own liberty. Your freedom is not a gift. It is a commodity you must purchase from your master at a legally set price, which usually equals your economic value. But how does a man with no property, no name, and only the clothes on his back acquire the massive sum required? This is your new intellectual puzzle, your new silent resistance, a challenge far more complex than chopping wood. Your master, the husbandee, is a meticulous accountant. He views you as an asset, a walking, working tool. He is invested in keeping you healthy enough to labor, but he is also financially incentivized to keep you from running away or dying. You begin to exploit this financial interest. You learn that thralls can acquire and hold property, often in the form of small, hard-earned savings. This is done through two primary, dangerous avenues. Stealing the crumbs, the art of the tiny theft. You become an expert at what can be discreetly siphoned off the farm. A small handful of grain from the mill floor, swept up and hidden beneath your tunic. A few scraps of leather left over from boot repair, which can be mended into a small coin pouch. The tiny, almost imperceptible amounts of fat or meat left on the bone after the freemen have eaten, which you hoard for personal energy. You are hoarding calories, materials, and potential trade goods. You hide these treasures in the most unlikely places, a hollowed-out root, a crevice in the dry stone wall, or beneath the hay in the animal pen, knowing that discovery means a severe beating and the loss of months of effort. The risk of this small daily theft becomes the background hum of your life. Petty trade and side hustles, the transactional thrall. You realize that your master may, in a moment of cynical generosity, allow you to work for another farmer on a feast day or during a particularly busy part of the season. Any silver, iron, or valuable commodity earned during this external labor is technically yours to keep, provided your master receives his mandatory portion first. You become an aggressive, quiet bargain hunter, valuing a single iron nail more than gold. You use your hard-won physical skills, your ability to carve, repair, or bind things, to earn tiny payments of hack silver, cut silver pieces. You whittle small toys, or mend tools for the master's children in exchange for small favors, or perhaps a slightly larger portion of the gruel. This is economic warfare fought at the level of pennies. The price of freedom, the ransom, is astronomical. It often required the equivalent value of a few cows or a valuable piece of land. To you, it is a sum that seems utterly insurmountable. It would take decades of ceaseless, perfect labor and ruthless saving to accumulate the necessary silver. You start to learn the weights and measures. You become obsessed with the price of goods. You listen intently to the bargaining that takes place at the hearth. You learn that silver is measured by weight, often in cut fragments of coinage. You acquire a few small tarnished fragments of silver, scraps you found in the dirt, or exchanged for a perfectly carved piece of wood. You hide them inside the horn of an old dead ram, wrapped tightly in linen. The physical weight of these small, cold pieces of metal in your palm is the most concrete, intoxicating hope you possess. The quietest danger is the temptation to stop. The thought creeps in. Why save? Why not just endure until I die? The effort required to work, save, remain invisible, and avoid detection is almost greater than the effort of the daily labor itself. You witness an older thrall, a man who had almost saved enough for his freedom, suddenly give up. He sold his small hoard of silver for a magnificent night of mead and food, consuming his life savings in a single, desperate moment of defiance and self-destruction. He continued working, but now with a completely empty future. You refuse to let yourself be that man. You must remain useful, but not too useful. If you become an irreplaceable source of labor, an expert blacksmith, or a supremely efficient field hand, your master may decide that keeping you as property is more profitable than taking your one-time ransom. Your ultimate goal is not to be the best thrall, but to be a valuable yet disposable one, a worker whose ransom is worth more than his indefinite service, but not so valuable that the master refuses to let you go. This requires an almost Machiavellian subtlety. Work hard enough to save your life, but not so hard that you become an essential, high-value asset. You realize that the master must publicly declare your manumission for it to be legally binding. This must be done in front of witnesses, often at the local thing, assembly, or at least in front of the farm's free members. This ensures that when you finally walk away, your status as a frialsmarder, freedman or woman, is verifiable. Without this legal step, you could be simply seized by another Viking and re-enslaved. The day finally comes when you witness the impossible. An older female thrall, who specialized in the household work and trade of cloth, presents her master with a small sack of silver. The weight is correct. The master, bound by the very laws he uses to oppress, accepts the payment. The manumission is declared. The sense of release is palpable, but the feeling you observe in her face is not joy. It is a profound, exhausted relief, mixed with a visible nervous terror. She now faces the immense hurdle of life as a freed person, burdened by the memory of thraldom and the absence of a social net. You watch her walk away with a slow, careful pace, not running, but simply walking, into the uncertain freedom of the wilderness. You now have a template. You have seen the price paid, the ritual performed, and the consequence lived. You redouble your efforts, silently counting the hours and the grams of silver required. You realize that your survival for the next 5 years will be defined by cold mathematics. You begin to dream not of comfort, but of numbers, the weight of a mark of silver, the conversion rate of barley to iron, and the final crushing sum. You retreat to your cold, draughty corner, the smell of damp earth and smoke a familiar comfort. You reach for your hidden cash, and the cold metal hits your palm. It's still not enough, but it is more than yesterday. You have survived the physical breaking, the psychological erasure, and now you are ready to begin the long, agonizing walk toward freedom. You have done it. After years of relentless labor, silent suffering, and the grinding mathematical accrual of every possible scrap of silver, you finally stood at the local thing, assembly, or, failing that, in the open air of the farmstead, with witnesses present. The master, the husbandi, with a cold, professional air, accepted your collected silver, your full ransom. The legal declaration was made. You are no longer a thrall. You are now a frealsmader, a freed man. Your first step away from the farm is slow, careful, and utterly disorienting. You had become so accustomed to the confines of the farm, to the immediate, brutal structure of command and obedience, that the sudden absence of those chains feels like a dangerous, weightless void. You are free to walk, yet you instinctively keep your eyes downcast and your pace steady, waiting for the familiar bark of a command that will never come. The terror of this new freedom is its immense fragility. You have no resources, no land, and no social connections other than the legal declaration that you are no longer property. This is the freedman's burden, the realization that freedom in the Viking Age is not a state of comfort, but a permanent, precarious struggle for social acceptance and economic solvency. You have traded the constant, low-level threat of the husbandi's cane for the constant, high-level threat of total social and economic collapse. Your first challenge is securing shelter and work. You cannot simply build a house on someone else's land. You are an alien, a former slave, and the community views you with profound suspicion. You quickly realize that the social stigma of thraldom clings to you like the stale smoke in your tattered clothing. When you approach a free bondi farmer to ask for work, the reaction is always the same, a cool, dismissive assessment. They look at your hands, thick, scarred and strong, and they see a useful laborer. But they look at your eyes, too hesitant and too quick to drop, and they remember your former status. You are an embarrassment to the free community, a walking reminder that any man can fall. You are forced to take the worst, most thankless tasks, the clearing of dense new forest, the digging of drainage ditches in the bogs, the dirty work that no free man would ever stoop to. You must work twice as hard for half the pay, perpetually proving your worth. You are surviving by becoming the low-cost solution to the community's nastiest problems. Your relationship with your former master is complicated and dangerous. The law dictates that a freed man owes his former owner a certain loyalty and, often, a legal relationship of patronage. You are bound to him for two critical reasons: debt and fealty. You may still owe him a debt, or he may exert a subtle pressure on your new life. He knows your past, your weaknesses, and the exact limits of your endurance. He still holds power over you. Protection. Paradoxically, your former master is often the only person who will vouch for your legal status. If another Viking tries to seize you and re-enslave you, a real and present danger, your former master is legally obligated to defend your freedom, as he is invested in maintaining the integrity of the manumission process. You must tread the line between independence and maintaining a beneficial, if humiliating, connection to the man who once owned you. You search for land, but all the good farmland is owned by bondir families who will not sell or lease to a former thrall. You are forced to look at the hostile peripheral lands, the rocky, unusable terrain far up the fjord, or the dense, uncleared forest, where logging is difficult and dangerous. You may try to become a landnamsmader, a settler, but to do so successfully requires capital, oxen, and the sheer strength of a family, none of which you possess. You are acutely aware of the constant threat of re-enslavement. This is the greatest terror of the frialsmader. If you commit a crime that results in a severe fine and you cannot pay it, the law allows you to be enslaved again to cover the debt. If you are found far from established settlements, without witnesses who can confirm your freed status, you are easily mistaken for a runaway thrall and seized. You become paranoid, constantly calculating your movements and avoiding confrontations. You clutch the small, tarnished silver coin you still possess, the one you saved last, not as money, but as an emergency tool, a potential bribe, or a final ticket out. You realize that a true, comfortable freedom requires a family, a wife and children who can work the land, build a home, and provide you with a network of support. But who will marry a former thrall, a man with no land, no family name, and little silver? The prospects are grim. You are forced to look for a wife among those on the margins of society, perhaps another frialsmader, or a very poor landless woman whose family has no better options. This marriage, if it happens, is based on economic necessity, not romance, but it is the critical building block of your future. You endure the passing years, surviving on grit and ceaseless labor. You manage to clear a small patch of land, enough to sustain a meager crop. You build a sod house, small and smoky, but yours. You are no longer sleeping on the dirt floor of a longhouse. You are sleeping on the cold, hard earth of your own property. This quiet, small victory is monumental. One evening, after a long day of working the earth, you sit by your own small fire. The air is cold, but the smoke is yours. You look at your hands. They are still cracked, thick, and calloused, but they are now your hands. They earned the food you just ate. They built the walls around you. You have survived the North Sea crossing, the grind of agricultural servitude, the psychological erasure, and the complex challenge of buying your own life back. You have endured the worst that the Viking Age could throw at you. Your life is not easy. It will never be easy. But you are warm, you are safe, and most importantly, you are legally free. You have won the ultimate battle. The right to non-existence has been replaced by the right to struggle on your own terms. The final quiet reflection comes, the silent, grim endurance of the millions who were bought, sold, and worked to death simply because they were on the wrong coast at the wrong time. You stand as the tiny, statistically insignificant exception, a testament to the fact that even at the bottom of the Norse world, a stubborn human will can sometimes, just sometimes, buy back its own. Soul, your long day is finally done.